In this moment, wearing this dress could cost you everything. 14 years in prison, a mob attack, your life. But here's what many people don't know about this dress. This rainbow, this symbol that millions wear on t-shirts, sneakers, and pride parades across the world, wasn't born as an act of rebellion. It was created as a beacon of hope in 1978 San Francisco. So how did a rainbow, a symbol of celebration, become a death warrant in Nigeria? The answer lies in a history that's been deliberately erased, a history that begins not in the 1970s, but in the 1860s, with a colonial law, a British law, a law that is still killing people today. Before we talk about the dress, we need to talk about what was stolen. Pre-colonial Nigeria. In the 19th century, before full British colonization, many African societies had complex understandings of gender and sexuality that didn't fit European categories. Among the Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria, there existed the practice of female husbands, women who married other women and took on masculine social roles to preserve family lineage and property rights, and it still exists till today. Among the Hausa in the north, there were the Yandaudu, individuals who existed outside strict gender binaries and often occupied important roles in ceremonial and spiritual life. The scholar Ife Amadume documented these practices in her groundbreaking work, Male Daughters, Female Husbands, showing that gender flexibility was woven into the social fabric of many pre-colonial African societies. This wasn't about sexuality as we define it today. It was about the reality that gender and social roles existed on a spectrum that Europeans either couldn't or wouldn't understand. Then came the British Empire. In 1861, Britain formally colonized Lagos. Over the following decades, they expanded their control across what would become Nigeria, completing the colonization by 1914. With British rule came more than guns and governance. They brought Victorian morality, Christian missionary schools, and most devastatingly, they brought Section 377 of the British Penal Code. The law reads, "Whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal shall be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 14 years and shall also be liable to fine." This law, drafted in London in 1960 and exported across the British Empire, criminalized same-sex relations in India, Kenya, Uganda, Malaysia, Singapore, and Nigeria. Over 70 countries in the British Empire inherited versions of this law. But Section 377 didn't just punish behavior, it performed a kind of historical erasure. It took indigenous African understandings of gender and sexuality and replaced them with a single imported narrative. This is unnatural, this is sinful, this is criminal. When Nigeria gained independence on October 1, 1960, the British left, the Union Jack came down, but their laws? Section 377 remained, embedded in Nigerians' criminal code as Section 214, unchanged, waiting. Now let's jump forward. San Francisco, 1978, a different kind of revolution. Harvey Milk, a camera shop owner who had just become California's first openly gay elected official, approached a young artist and activist named Gilbert Baker. Harvey had a request. The gay community needs a symbol, something that says we exist, we're proud, we're not going anywhere. Something to replace the pink triangle, the Nazi symbol that had marked gay men for extermination. Baker, a self-taught seam maker who had learned to sew in the U.S. Army, looked to nature for inspiration. He chose the rainbow, a natural phenomenon, universal, unchosen, undeniable. In his words, flags are torn from the soul of the people. Working with a small team of volunteers in the attic of the Gay Community Center in San Francisco, Baker hand-dyed and hand-stitched the first 2 flags. Each had 8 colors, and each color carried a specific meaning. Hot pink represented sex, red represented life, orange represented healing, yellow represented sunlight, green represented nature, indigo represented serenity, violet represented spirit. It wasn't meant to be a weapon. It wasn't meant to be political. It was meant to be human, a celebration of diversity in all its forms. On June 25, 1978, the rainbow flag flew for the first time at the San Francisco Gay Freedom Day Parade. Dozens of flags lined the parade route. The response was immediate and powerful. People saw themselves in it. Then, on November 27, 1978, just 5 months after the flag's debut, Harvey Milk was assassinated by a former city supervisor. The rainbow flag, already growing in popularity, took on new meaning. It became a memorial, a promise, a refusal to disappear. But the flag itself needed to change to spread. Hot pink fabric was too expensive and difficult to source for mass production, so that stripe was removed. Then, in 1979, when the Pride Parade Committee wanted to split the flag down the middle to hang on street lamps along the parade route, they needed an even number of stripes. Turquoise was removed. What remained was the 6-stripe rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet, that would circle the globe over the next 4 decades. By the 1990s and 2000s, you could see it everywhere: pride parades in Sao Paulo, protests in Berlin, marches in Sydney. It had become the international symbol of LGBTQ+ pride and liberation. And that's when it arrived in Nigeria. Not as fabric at first, as an idea, through the internet, through diaspora communities, through the global human rights movement. Fast forward to January 7, 2014. Nigeria is at a crossroads. President Goodluck Jonathan is facing mounting criticism. Boko Haram is terrorizing the Northeast. Corruption scandals are everywhere. The economy is struggling. Politically, Jonathan needs something to unite his fractured base, Christians and Muslims, North and South. He finds it in a common enemy. On that day, President Jonathan signs the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act into law. The law had passed the Senate in 2011 and the House of Representatives in 2013 with overwhelming support, 93-1 in the Senate. But here's what's crucial. The name Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act is deeply misleading. Same-sex marriage was already impossible under Nigerian law. This new law went much, much further. It criminalized any same-sex marriage or civil union ceremony with a penalty of 14 years in prison. It banned the registration of gay clubs, societies, and organizations, 10 years in prison. It criminalized public displays of same-sex affection. It made it illegal to even witness or abet a same-sex marriage without reporting it to authorities. It effectively outlawed being openly LGBTQ in Nigeria. In the 12 northern states operating under Sharia law, the penalty for same-sex relations wasn't 14 years, it was death by stoning. The law passed with overwhelming public support. Churches celebrated. Mosques celebrated. Politicians across party lines called it protecting African values and defending our culture against Western influence. But there's a devastating irony here. Section 377, the foundation of all of Nigeria's anti-LGBTQ+ laws, is British, colonial, written in Victorian London and imposed on Nigeria by force. The very law being defended as authentically African was the Western import. And yet, by 2014, the narrative had completely flipped. Now, LGBTQ+ rights were framed as Western cultural imperialism. Homosexuality was un-African, foreign, corrupting. And the rainbow flag, that symbol created by an American artist in San Francisco, became proof this is not our culture, this is not who we are. But that framing erases a crucial piece of the story. While Nigerian activists were organizing in the 2000s, American evangelical organizations were simultaneously pouring millions of dollars into African countries, lobbying for precisely these kinds of laws. Groups like the World Congresses of Families, the Alliance Defending Freedom, and American pastors like Scott Lively actively worked with African legislatures to draft and pass anti-LGBTQ+ legislation across the continent. The Ugandan Kill the Gays bill, proposed in 2009, had direct American evangelical fingerprints on it. Nigeria's 2014 law followed a similar pattern. This wasn't organic African cultural preservation. This was transnational religious conservatism using African governments as testing grounds. So here's the cruel paradox. The colonizers created the law. The colonizers erased indigenous African gender systems, but post-colonial leaders weaponized homophobia as anti-colonialism, as pan-Africanism, as cultural authenticity, and American evangelicals funded it while calling it an African movement. This is the impossible tension that Nigerian LGBTQ+ activists face. How do you reclaim your African identity when the very definition of African has been constructed to exclude you? It's worth noting that Pan-Africanism itself is not monolithic. South Africa legalized same-sex marriage in 2006, the 5th country in the world to do so, and wrote LGBTQ+ protections into its post-apartheid constitution.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, "I would refuse to go to a homophobic heaven. No, I would say sorry. I would much rather go to the other place." Nelson Mandela's government was the first in Africa to constitutionally prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation. But these voices are often drowned out in Nigerian discourse, where anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric has become a proxy for sovereignty, for resisting Western influence, for being truly African. So what does it mean to wear the rainbow in Nigeria today? It means everything. For young Nigerians, particularly in cities like Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Abuja, social media has become both a lifeline and a minefield. Instagram handles with rainbow emojis in the bio, coded language, Twitter threads that dance around explicit identification, private WhatsApp groups that function as digital safe houses. These online spaces allow Nigerian LGBTQ+ people to find each other, to build community, to know they're not alone. But visibility always comes with risk. In August 2018, 57 men were arrested in a hotel in Lagos during a birthday party. Police claimed they were planning a gay wedding, a claim the men denied, saying it was simply a birthday celebration. They were paraded before media cameras, their photos spread across Nigerian social media and news sites. Comment sections filled with calls for violence. Some of the men reported being tortured in detention. The case dragged through courts for months. In 2020, 47 men were arrested in a hotel in Delta State, charged under the 2014 law. Their trial continues. These aren't isolated incidents. Human Rights Watch has documented dozens of cases where the 2014 law has been used not just for prosecution, but as a tool for extortion, blackmail, and mob violence. Police arrest people on suspicion, knowing families will pay to keep the charges quiet. Landlords evict tenants, employers fire workers. And because the law bans LGBTQ+ organizations, there are no legal advocacy groups that can publicly operate to defend those arrested. The law doesn't just punish, it isolates, it silences, it erases. And yet, resistance continues. Nigerian LGBTQ+ activists, many working under pseudonyms, many having fled the country, some still operating in secret within Nigeria, are fighting back. Organizations like the Initiative for Equal Rights, though forced to operate cautiously, provide legal aid, HIV services, and advocacy. Activists like B.C. Alimi, a Nigerian man who came out publicly on national television in 2004 and now lives in exile in the UK, continue to speak out. Writers like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and Wana Udobong have pushed Nigerian conversations on gender and sexuality forward as they navigate complex cultural terrain. In 2016, a coalition of Nigerian human rights groups filed a case with the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice challenging the 2014 law as a violation of international human rights standards. That case is still pending. Nigerian lawyers are simultaneously challenging the law in domestic courts, arguing it violates constitutional rights to freedom of expression, assembly, privacy, and dignity. The legal battle is slow. The cultural battle is ongoing. But every time someone wears that dress, in Lagos, in Abuja, in the hidden corners of northern Nigeria, they are making a choice. They are choosing to exist, loudly, defiantly, beautifully. The rainbow flag itself has continued to evolve, reflecting the ongoing work of making liberation truly inclusive. In 2017, the city of Philadelphia added 2 new stripes to the top of the flag, black and brown, to explicitly center LGBTQ+ people of color and acknowledge the unique forms of discrimination they face within both LGBTQ and racial justice spaces. Then in 2018, designer Daniel Quasar created what's now called the Progress Pride flag. It kept the traditional 6-stripe rainbow, but added a chevron on the left side containing 5 additional colors, the black and brown stripes for people of color, and light blue, pink, and white, the colors of the transgender flag, designed by trans activist Monica Helms in 1999. The chevron points right, symbolizing forward movement and progress still needed. In 2021, Valentino Vecchietti of Intersex Equality Rights UK added a yellow triangle with a purple circle to the chevron, the colors and symbol of the intersex pride flag, creating the most inclusive version yet. Each addition is a recognition. The struggle for liberation is not one size fits all. Marginalization exists within marginalization, and the movement must constantly examine who it centers and who it leaves behind. Nowhere is this more evident than in Nigeria, where LGBTQ+ activists are fighting on multiple, interconnected fronts, against colonial-era laws, against religious fundamentalism from both Christian and Muslim institutions, against the weaponization of Pan-Africanism and cultural authenticity arguments, against American evangelical influence disguised as African values, against poverty and economic precarity that makes visibility a luxury many cannot afford, against a state apparatus that criminalizes their very existence. The rainbow, in this context, isn't just pride, it's survival. It's a refusal to be erased again. The dress you wear without thinking, the rainbow on your sneakers, your backpack, your phone case, your laptop sticker, carries a history most of us never learned. It carries Gilbert Baker's vision of beauty and diversity. It carries the memory of Harvey Milk and all those lost to violence and AIDS. It carries the weight of Section 377 and British colonial law. It carries the resistance of South African activists who wrote LGBTQ rights into their post-apartheid constitution. It carries the courage of those who wear it in Lagos, where it is not a fashion statement, but a declaration of existence.
If decolonization means rejecting everything associated with the West, then colonial laws written in London remain, while rainbow flags are torn down. But if decolonization means reclaiming the full complexity of African identity, including the gender fluidity that existed before colonization, then the fight for LGBTQ+ rights in Nigeria is not Western influence, it's the completion of an unfinished liberation. As of 2024, 67 countries still criminalize same-sex relations. More than half of those laws are colonial-era statutes, many based directly on Section 377. The vast majority are in former British colonies. The rainbow flag now flies in every corner of the world, but in some places it flies in secret, in private homes, in online profiles with carefully coded language, in the hearts of people who cannot yet say out loud who they are. This is the untold story of the rainbow flag, and in Nigeria, the war for the right to simply exist is still being fought. One dress, one court case, one brave act of visibility at a time. The history isn't over, it's unfolding right now, and the question remains, will we recognize colonial law for what it is, or will we continue to call oppression, culture, and liberation foreign? The dress is still dangerous, but it's also still being worn. And that, perhaps, is where hope lives.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe. See you next time on Historic News.